Hello and welcome to Minivangelism, the driver's seat, where we talk about the Bible without the kids in the car. If the kids are in the car, go listen to something else. Because today we are talking about
Crypto
and Spotify Wrapped.
or we could do a Spotify rap.
That'd be fun.
And how Drew hit the marital jackpot.
You bet. We're glad you're here.
All right, let's go.
Hello and welcome to Minivangelism, the driver's seat, where we talk about the Bible without the kids in the car. If the kids are in the car, go listen to something else. This one's just for the grown-ups. Today, we are talking about the story of Joseph, and we can't wait to do so with you.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm excited.
So, Anna.
Yes, Drew.
What is the version of the Joseph story that you inherited?
I inherited... I remember learning about this in Sunday school, like not in parts. Like it was just very like condensed down. Like I don't think we really got into the whole like reason his brothers were mad and like how he ended up in Egypt. Like his dad really liked him. He ended up in Egypt. He ended up, well, spoilers, but like he ends up in jail and you know how the story concludes. I remember we had some VHS tape and, you know, the VHS like have all the previews on them. And one of the previews was for the like Donny Osmond, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Cause they were like releasing it on home video.
Yeah. And
I remember I knew the song Go, 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 Joseph, but just the chorus from that like one preview of this video that I watched a lot.
Yeah, that would have been an annoying thing for my kid to know.
Yes, and like that's all I really like know. Like that's how I inherited it. There was like an animated version later from the same people that did Prince of Egypt, but I don't think I ever saw it. Did you?
No, I don't think so.
But yeah, but I just that he was a dreamer. Like that's what I got from it. What about you?
I think I remember the musical pretty well. I think there's a filmed version before the Donny Osmond one, which I think I saw. Mm-hmm. I think my parents also like took us to see the musical once. Mm-hmm. I actually have a strange core memory. Okay. When I was like 10, we were on a vacation. It's funny because we just got back from a vacation this year where all our kids got sick. We were on a vacation and I got sick and ended up in the hospital while we were down there.
True.
And basically just needed a whole lot of IV fluids. So you can fill in the gaps there about what my symptoms were.
Oh,
no. But I was maybe under 10, but I was stuck in a hospital room, stuck with an IV pole and kind of going nuts. And my mom found I don't remember what kind of room, maybe a chapel or auditorium or something. And she could play piano and she played a little bit of one of the songs and from the musical and I was allowed to like get out and run and dance with my IV pole. So like kind of a Tiny Tim moment. But it's tied to this musical forever. And the other thing that I think I inherited is the story like just as a story.
Yeah.
So not necessarily it doesn't sit in my memory like a Bible story about God. In part because God's not really like a main character on the scene for the story. It's just kind of a story look at these terrible brothers and all this bad stuff that happens to Joseph.
Yeah.
And so like some of the theology around it has happened later. Mm-hmm. But I wonder what bugs you about the story. Or what makes you curious about it?
Joseph gets on my nerves in this section of the story.
Yeah.
Like I have always been like, just stop talking. Like, so, maybe we have inside thoughts. And dreaming that you're better than everybody is an inside thought.
Yeah.
That may just be like oldest child syndrome going.
Yeah.
Because I try to think like if my brother had ever tried to say I'm better than you. Right. He did. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like my response is like, shut up.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember studying this story as an adult when we lived in Texas. One of our Sunday school classes, like we did a book study on this like book that had Joseph as the center of it. And I remember thinking that too, like just reading about it. And I'm like, no, it's not the dreams that got you killed. It was your arrogance.
Yeah.
He's an arrogant son of a gun at the beginning.
He's son of his father. Like, they like that runs in the family.
Yeah.
His father, Jacob, is not a likable guy either.
No.
And yet, he's the one who inherits the blessing that's being passed down, this blessing of God.
Yeah.
Which is not fair.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think it's more, we've talked about this on the podcast so many times. It's just another example of a horrible person being blessed by God. And I hate it.
Yeah.
Jesus, God chooses the broken and the sinners. And I know that I'm one of them, but damn it, I try so hard to not be,
Yeah. Shouldn't this stuff be earned?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another story in which there's not really a good guy.
No, because it doesn't say anything about like Joseph's righteousness.
Right.
It's just he won the genetic lottery with his mom, and like that's it.
Right. It's as if God's blessing is just offered willy-nilly. Yeah.
Dadgummit.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like he's super annoying. We're told he's 17, but I always picture him as younger than that because those are the people that annoy me the most is the younger people. But I also wonder, like, do you think that he actually a jerk or is he just a young, naive teenager?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you were the first person that ever
annoyed
kind of
you.
like well, no, you were the first person that annoyed me. You're the person that currently, I'm just kidding. No, I think you were the first person that did point out like he was so much younger than his brothers. And it could have just been like him being an idiot.
Yeah.
Because that's what teenagers are. No offense to the teenagers listening to this, but like their frontal lobe is not fully developed.
Their ability to keep inside thoughts inside is not fully developed.
Yeah, and I used to teach high school, so I know like they don't keep their inside thoughts in.
Right.
The comments I would get from 17-year-old boys when I was pregnant, just, like, whoa, why are your feet so big? Like, yeah, and so, I get that, but I don't know. I still think at 17, like, we can't excuse it all the way. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think we need to get Joseph all the way out the hook, but it's, but when this shows up in real life, it can often be out of ignorance or naivete that somebody doesn't know how what they say is going to affect others.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's the brother's reaction is really irrational.
Yes.
And but the Bible gives us these extreme stories, like Cain and Abel.
Okay, all right, but like another example of like, hey Joseph, shut up, and you're kind of being an idiot, is because in the chapter before this, Joseph's brothers kill an entire town.
Right.
Like their sister is assaulted, and so the brothers convince all of the men in this one village to circumcise themselves, and then while they're recovering, they go in and kill them. Like, these are violent people who don't do well to being offended. And so to have your brothers kill, I think it was just 2 of them, but still, to have them kill a whole village and then be like, oh, by the way, I had a dream that I'm better than you. Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah. It also shows like Genesis is not the book of great people.
No.
In fact, like from Cain and Abel on, like there's blood in the water.
Yeah.
And so Genesis is where you want to go to be reminded of, to be given a low view of humanity.
Yes.
That's what's on display here is not how great people are. It's how terrible they are. And these are all kind of origin stories of some of the worst aspects of human relationships.
Yeah.
This particular story is one that a lot of preachers talked about during the Civil War, particularly because it's brother against brother.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you can imagine how like that's not the only time in human history where this story has seemed relevant. Where for dumb reasons, violence is chosen. Where you probably could have gotten through it. Like,
Yeah.
you probably could have just ignored him for a little longer and not had to try to kill him. And so it's one of the ways in which the Bible continues to kind of hold a mirror up to us and say, you collective humanity are messed up.
Yeah.
Like you need some help.
Yeah.
And even like it's even kind of messed up that we say, well, why is Joseph getting this blessing? Like, why did Jacob get it? Like, that's not fair. It holds a mirror up to that inherent sense of wanting A, to be fair, and B, to end up on top. Like, I think often when we think things aren't fair, it's because we're not on top. Like, like
all the time.
It's self-interested sense of justice. And the Bible, this is the picture of humanity that the Bible paints.
Yeah.
It's less, you're destined for greatness, or anything like that. It's no, you're a POS, and this is the story of what God does with this messed up humanity, this messed up family.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, like where the brothers attack Joseph, right? So like after all this goes down, after Joseph offends everybody, they leave. They get out of town. Like they take their flocks and they're gone. And Jacob sends Joseph out to go and check on them. And that's when they're like, let's get him. Here he comes.
Right.
Let's get him. And I think it's one of those, like, they got away from Joseph, and I can't remember who it was. It may have been you, or maybe somebody else that was like, maybe Jacob even like sent the brothers away to like have them calm
cool
down.
Off. Yeah.
But they've just been like stewing on it.
Yeah.
You know what I've been thinking about it. They've probably been like, that's the only thing they talked about on the way out was just like trash talking their brothers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then for him to show up, like it has like really kind of just manifested at that point.
One thing that's cool in the language of this story in the Bible is the words down and out basically are in the narrative. So he's sent out, then he goes down into a pit, then he's sent both down and out into Egypt, and then when he's in Egypt, as we'll hear soon, he goes down into prison there. Yeah. So it's a downward trajectory for Joseph the whole time, and that kind of highlights any story where we know where somebody is down and out, and it also echoes for anybody who is feeling down and out. Yeah. But it's cool how it actually happens like geographically and physically in the story, and so narratively that begins with the brothers being sent away, maybe to cool off, but it also gets Joseph further away from the blessing of his father.
Right.
He's in that way. This is also a story of exile, and in the Bible, in the writing of the Bible, we think that a lot of these stories were actually written down while the people were in exile.
Yes. And
so you can read the whole story as the story of the people of Israel, who are chosen among the nations, but have found themselves now down and out. And as the story goes on, we'll see it get really low, but then we'll see the curve turn, and Joseph starts to have this ascent. And in that way, that curve is a narrative curve that happens over and over in the Bible. You can think of Jonah and the whale, and of course Jesus in the grave, then being raised. In a sense, like that's the shape of the gospel, is down and out, and then up and in.
Yeah.
As this promise that's being played out through human history. Can we talk a little bit about Jesus?
I mean, I guess. You're always bringing him up. It's like you're obsessed with him. Oh my goodness.
Well, a different way of getting at it is the same question we asked Sophia, is like, where is God in the story? So I'll ask you, where's God in the story? Like, short answer is God is not in the story.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
He's not mentioned. He's not there. Because I know the ending of the story, I know where God is. And God is in the mercy shown to Joseph. By not being killed, by being sent to Egypt, huge things happen for him and his family. But yeah, I think you see God in Reuben and Reuben's response of just like, you know, he had every intention to come back and save his brother, right? He stepped in, he intervened, which is what God does sometimes. Like when things seem to be going really, really horribly and they don't look like they're going to end well, God's going to intervene. It may not be the intervention that we want, because I'm sure Joseph would have just rather had Reuben be like, back up, scram, get out of here, and then like take him away. But instead he's like, let's just throw him in a pit. And so,
well, and the intervention may not come when you want it. Like there may be more downward trajectory.
Yeah, because that was Reuben's plan, was like, you're going to have to sit in that pit for a little bit.
Right.
And I think Reuben making Joseph wait in the pit, I don't know if he did it on purpose, but like maybe Joseph needed a timeout. Maybe you do need to sit in that pit and think about what got you here. You know what I mean? Like he was almost parenting his little brother. I used to do that all the time.
Shocked. I was shocked.
I know, right? I was the third parent in my house. And I see that with my own children. Like I have to tell my oldest all the time, you are not her mother.
Right.
Like the way she parents her sister.
Right.
So yeah, like I don't know. And God kind of does that too sometimes.
Yeah.
You're going to have to sit here for a minute and think about what got you here.
Right.
Before you get you get pulled out.
Yeah. I think like an additional answer to like, where is God in the story is that interpretive key of who's suffering. That's the one who God is.
Right.
And
I just don't want to give Joseph that credit.
The way that happens in Joseph is it's not right. He's not an innocent victim. But he's the one who bears the blessing. So God, the blessing itself is what is threatened. Yeah. The future of this family that God has chosen to build, that is what is in jeopardy. And you can go through all of Genesis and just follow the blessing and see that it's the blessing of God, the promise of God, is the one that seems in jeopardy. And I think that resonates deeply with me, because whenever I have momentary or long-term crises of faith, the things I'm holding up are the promise of God and present circumstances. Yeah. And it seems like the promise of God is in jeopardy. And in some ways, this story and stories like it, let us see just how jeopardized that promise can get. Yeah. Where Joseph is exiled and beaten up and thrown out by his brothers, and sold to another nation. That implies that maybe this is not going to work out for God. Maybe God's not going to get what God wants out of this family. Maybe they're going to turn on each other and ruin the whole thing. And that's kind of where we leave off this story. And I think that's where some of the theological drama is in the narrative. I also think it's where the drama is in my faith. Yeah. It's actually my job to proclaim this promise every week. And every week, at some point in the week, I feel the jeopardy that this promise seems to be under. I see, yes, I understand that God has said these things, and yet look at these people in a pit. Like, where is God for them? Mm-hmm. And part of what the gift of the scriptures gives us is that it's always been like that. Right. That the promise of God is not normal, and is not easy street. It's always been this battle between God's promise and present circumstances. And the invitation for the people of God is to nevertheless believe in this promise and trust in it, and let that be what guides your decisions or guides your heart, even through the thing. And the reason why this story means so much to the Christian tradition is because Jesus follows Joseph's downward trajectory. And there's so many kind of hyperlinks of things that happen to Joseph that end up happening to Jesus. Even like the meal that happens outside the pit. There's lots of resonance with Jesus' Last Supper.
Yeah.
Judas is at that table. And the rest of the disciples, they don't get what's going on. Mm-hmm. The only one who gets it is Judas. And Judas is the one who's about to sell Jesus for silver. But when in Jesus' story, Jesus is the one who's actually giving the meal. And it's at that moment of deep drama and jeopardy that Jesus starts doling out promises. It's at rock bottom where Jesus goes in order to be able to give out these promises. Yeah. And I think those are intended as a comfort. But this is a story told in we're telling it in 3 sessions. It's a whole bunch of chapters. And it's not quick.
No.
It's not quick.
No. There's also the parallel between the being sold for pieces of silver.
Right.
But inflation. Jesus costs more.
Yes.
He's 30 pieces of silver, whereas Joseph was only 20.
I love it.
So we can look at the exchange rate between Genesis and the Gospels. So I think that's not a bad, inflation rate for like thousands of years.
Yeah,
for it
it's
only
not bad
to be
at all.
10 more pieces of silver.
No, it's much worse today.
Yeah. So
it'd be Bitcoin.
Oh God, don't get me started. Don't get me started on crypto. You're not into that, are you?
No, I can't afford to get in that game. It's okay though. I'm not missing it.
You know that we are friends, right? We are friends. We are friends.
Okay.
If you ever start talking about crypto, I will drop you as a friend.
All right.
The podcast, if you ever notice that Minivangelism has gone dark, it's because Drew started talking about crypto.
I don't think our friendship is jeopardized by that. I think it's okay.
Okay, good.
It's going to be all right.
I will walk through fire, except if you talk about crypto. So, anyway, I digress. One of the I wonders that I have as an adult is, do you think that Joseph... So in the Minivangelism episode, you asked me if all dreams come from God, right? And my answer to that is I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think dreams are a psychological thing and they come from your subconscious, and we can talk about dream journals if you want to, but... I'm
good.
That's my crypto.
You know that we are friends, right?
That's my crypto. But do you think that at any point... during this saga, like the part we talked about today, this episode, Joseph began to question the promises of God? Do you think at any point he was like, maybe those dreams were just because I ate some bad chicken? Like, what do you
think?
I think yes.
Yeah, if he's human, of course.
Yeah, I don't think he was like, but God said, you know what I mean? Like, right. I think that he questioned it.
That's precisely the crisis.
Yeah.
Is the but God said part of things.
Mm-hmm.
And in the musical there's a beautiful song of that precise moment. It's funny though, because it's dangerous when there's musicals or movies made from Bible stories, because I can remember realizing that song, it's not in the Bible. Like, that's just that we needed a ballad and we put it right there.
And it's so good.
It's so good. But yeah, I think that it's fair to read that into the story. Joseph doesn't talk like that much, but to the degree that he's human, yes. If he doesn't feel that way, it's because he's a naive teenager and just like, nope, this is fine. Yeah. But I don't really think that there's any way that that's the case. His name, so Jacob means like grasper or wrestler. Mm-hmm. Joseph means struggler. And so what we see is like the struggle, all the way down. I have to believe that he was genuinely struggling. And yeah, I think, that's part of the vibe that this story gives me, is like the struggle is real.
Yeah.
And the promise is true.
Right. And yeah, and I just wonder, like, at what points in his journey did he question the promises of God? But then at what points did he lean on those promises? Not just the promises that were in his dream, because Joseph is from a line of people who are being promised greatness by God, right? Starting from his, great-grandfather, right? On through, God has been like very adamant, like, you are my people, you are something special. And that Jacob was feeding that, especially to Joseph.
Yeah.
Of like, we are the chosen people. And so, yeah, I just wonder, like, at what points Joseph maybe struggled with his faith, and at what points. I think there are times in my life where I may be struggling with my faith, but I cannot let go or I will sink. You know what I mean? I have to hold on to that promise, even if I'm not so sure that promise is true, because I can't see it. I have to. It could be a coping mechanism or whatever, but like, I don't know. That's just important to me.
Yeah, of course it is. My psychology is messed up enough. I get to that point like multiple times a day.
I
It does. And I think that's the gig. I think I don't believe folks that say they believe and say it's easy. Like, it's not.
No.
It's this, what one person called, like, it's the rumor of grace. This rumor that exists in this family that, grandpa talked to God and, and God says everything's going to be okay. And we're going to have land and people and everything. And through our family, all the nations of the world will be blessed. It's insane. And so is the rumor that, like, death is real, but not final. So is the rumor that, my sins are forgiven.
That's the one I struggle
So
with.
is the rumor that that all creation and all humanity will be restored to right relationship. But the way St. Paul talks about it is for Christians particularly, it all hinges on the ridiculous story of the resurrection, which is eternally ridiculous. And yet St. Paul says, if it didn't happen, then anybody who believes in it is most to be pitied, because we're just plain idiots. If it did happen, then all things will be made new.
Right.
And I'd love to make it easier or even rational, but like that's it.
Right.
And like that's the moment that I get to multiple times a day is it's either this or it ain't, and it better be this.
Yeah.
It better be real. And then I think in life we have experiences from this personal God who shows up on our prison cell or in our dreams and gives us some form of daily bread that can feed us enough to say, this is real. This is worth believing in. I'm not a liar.
Right.
And those are the things, the breadcrumbs that we cling to. And yes, there's an opportunity for another allusion to communion, but I'll let that happen.
You love it. You love always bringing it back to communion. Once again, it's like you're obsessed with communion.
But in the end, like that's Jesus's story is Joseph's story, but it's doubled down on the crisis of this thing is over.
Yeah.
And Easter is the thing that says it ain't over, and it's for real, and all of the promises of God are trustworthy and true. And the life of faith is living in the tension and ultimately being moved by the Holy Spirit to trust the promise that God's not a liar.
Yeah. I remember talking to one of my parents about it. I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad, about like, what if we're wrong?
Right.
And I just remember one of them saying, if I'm wrong, I have nothing to lose.
Right.
But if I'm right, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have so much to gain from that. And I think that's true. Like, yeah, this rumor, if the rumor proves to be true, like that's an awesome thing. But if it's wrong, like, all right, I'll lose.
Yeah.
The rumor is what gets me through.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the thing that we cling to, especially when it's hard.
And all of this is also relevant to the fact that this is a story about a very normal, perhaps extra dysfunctional family. And and I continue to love that so many of the Bible stories are stories that happen in families.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this time around reading this story, I just thought about our own family.
Yeah.
And because we're definitely at the time where if there's any sense of unfairness, it's a major problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any slight, there's not a proportional response.
No.
There's a
Violence
massive
is the
response.
answer.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's another sense in which like the Bible is just telling the truth about us.
Yeah.
And the ways in which like children, because of their lack of filter, they show us like the raw truth about us.
Yes.
So I wonder, how do you talk about this with your kids, or how does it show up in your life with your kids?
So the one thing about this story and my children, before I get into how I talk about it, my daughter was also in the musical with your daughter last year. And this musical has absolutely wrecked my Spotify Wrapped. It was my number one album, my number one artist, my number one song, like the top 5 of all the things. I got a special note from Andrew Lloyd Webber because I was in the top 1% of listeners.
Got a cameo. Thank you so much.
I'm relevant again. So I don't talk to my kids about this story because I commute to work with them. Like that's just...
They've got it.
They know it. No, in talking to my kid, I mean, I did talk about it when I was like directing the show and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We focused a lot on the reaction to an annoying sibling.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's how the approach that I start with.
Yeah.
Is just, okay, maybe we don't hit. Maybe we keep our hands to ourselves. Maybe we watch how we speak, because our words can be just as powerful as our fists sometimes. Because if my oldest, she can deliver some like blows, right? Like my youngest will throw hands, but the oldest one will just say something that you're like, oh God, that really hurts. That hurt my feelings. But like, just when you see such a disproportionate response to annoyance, you know what I mean? Between siblings, like that's a really good place to point and be like, hey, maybe let's not go there.
Right.
And talk about like, put them in the situation. What would you have done if your sibling treated you like this? Right? Like that's a conversation I can have with my oldest, is how would you feel if your little sister just came and like said, I'm the favorite.
Right.
And everybody loves me. Or how would you feel if I treated your sister better than I treat you?
Yeah. That's some like building of empathy.
Yes.
Like taking a narrative and helping it build empathy. All good things. And I think there's another thing that kind of theologically happens with Jesus. Jesus, through the Holy Spirit, kind of makes us all a part of him. And in that sense, like we are all God's favorite. In that sense, we are all Joseph. And to me, that's an invitation to help my children start to see one another as Joseph and see themselves as Joseph.
Yeah.
That like God's favoritism happens to be an eternal resource. And each of us is God's favorite in that way. Each of us is a child of God in that way. And so something that when we have presence of mind, we try to do is like when there's a misstep or a disproportional response, we try to say, no, like that person deserves to be treated better than that, because they're a person because they're a child of God. It's the same kind of thing we've talked about before, where like somebody says something about our spouse, like our kid says something like rude to our spouse, and we say, no one is allowed to speak to my wife that way.
Yes.
Including my own children. Or I have said, like, nobody's allowed to treat any one of my children that way, including my other children.
Yes.
That the reason it's wrong is not necessarily only because you did a bad thing. It's because that person is sacred. And I think that's part of what the whole story of the Bible gives us, is a sense in everyone's chosenness.
Yeah.
That it's not just limited to one person, but it's actually the way God feels about each person. And based on their inherent value, it's worth taking the time to maybe not kill them. You know?
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, even the theology of baptism is that like part of baptism in the ancient tradition was you get baptized and then you get a new coat. You get this baptismal gown, which is like putting on Christ or putting on the favoritism of God. So especially among baptized people, that is part of what the church says about each of us. And it makes me think of this quote from this theologian, Stanley Hauerwas. Maybe it's not his, maybe it's somebody else, but he had it like posted outside of his office that said, it was titled "A Modest Proposal for Peace." That Christians will agree to not kill other Christians.
I love that.
And people would like knock on his door and say, like, that's not good enough. Christians shouldn't kill anybody. And he said, that's why it's a modest proposal for peace. If we could just start there, like you can imagine being on like the field of battle and having to first ask, are you a baptized child of God?
Oh my God.
And if so, then I am not permitted to kill you. All of that is true. But you can imagine if it were actually part of our process, you know, like before I say this cruel thing to you, are you a baptized child of God? If so, I'm just not permitted to say this. Right. That's part of the frontal lobe process, or just part of how this story informs our encounters with others. And I think like part of the challenge of parenting is to try to nudge our kids in that direction. So that they start to see the person who to them in this moment is Judas, you know, or to them in this moment is one of these brothers, or is Joseph, to start to say they are more than just that.
Yeah.
They're more than what they just did to you.
Yeah.
And based on that, on their inherent worth, that's why we need to actually consider what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the effect that it has.
I think that like at first read, everybody's going to identify with Joseph.
Yeah.
Right? Especially children.
Right.
Children are going to identify with Joseph because not all children, but a lot of children are coddled and told how special they are and told how wonderful they are or whatever.
And expect fairness and
yeah. And so to then turn it around on a child and be like, no, you're not Joseph, you're Issachar.
Yeah.
Or Dan. You know, like I think that's a hard conversation, but it's a necessary one for kids.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to like kind of have a test of just like like present the story to a child and be like, whose side are you on? And then if they say I'm on Joseph's side, you're gonna like, yes. And not like, good, they should have thrown him in a pit. Like, oh no. All right.
We've got one of those that if anybody's throwing somebody in a pit, they're for it.
We've started doing like sociopath tests with our kids where we intentionally watch sad movies and like see like
if they have feelings.
And I have one that will just like, if she sees anybody in pain, like she's crying. And then the other one will be like, that makes me kind of sad. And we're like, all right, whew,
that's good.
That's an extra year of therapy we don't have to pay for.
I think the one other thing I want to mention is just a shout out to my wife.
She's awesome.
I know she's a medical professional. We've talked about that before. But she's a different kind of medical professional because she regards every patient she sees as a child of God. whether they're annoying or dumb or rude or what have you. There's something about the way that God made her where she actually has a capacity to regard people as God's own. And it's incredibly rare. And I think it's the kind of thing that we point out in the saints.
Yeah.
That people who have come to believe this promise so much that it actually changes how they are with people. And so I just wanted to celebrate that. And I think it's connected to belief.
Yes.
If God's promises are true, then each person I regard is not just someone out to get me or someone I'm in competition with. They are a fellow person chosen by God to receive God's blessing.
Yeah.
And that radically transforms families, communities, encounters. But I do think it comes back to what do you basically believe about what's going on in life?
Yeah.
Is it Cain versus Abel? Is it Joseph versus the brothers? Is it we're all in competition and he or she with the most prizes wins? Or is it we are all on the struggle bus?
Yeah.
And nevertheless we are chosen. And therefore let us choose one another.
Yeah. I like that. There are two things that I want to add. First of all, I think when we do a Job episode, your wife needs to come in and be the guest.
That's fine.
Because if anybody embodies just like patience, it's her.
I don't know if it's good podcast material, but I love that we're just talking about my wife for a while.
She's the most like patient,
she's the best. Yeah.
Empathetic.
Yes.
Yeah. She's awesome.
Yes.
She's my best friend.
Good.
I love her more than you do. And so I'm just kidding. The other thing is, you're talking about like all these like messed up families in Genesis. There's another echo of a messed up brother relationship in this story. And that has to do with the Ishmaelite traders.
Yeah.
Like the author makes a point to say that these are Ishmaelite traders. And if you go back to Joseph's grandfather, Isaac, Ishmael was his brother.
Right.
His older brother. And here you have another example of the younger brother getting the favor.
Right.
And an exile. Like Ishmael is the one that ends up being exiled. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I just think that's like an interesting reminder in the story.
Absolutely. It's an effed up family.
Yeah.
And they can't get rid of each other.
No.
Even Ishmael comes back up in the story. Joseph is going to come back and encounter these brothers later.
Yeah.
Like there's some unfortunate gospel in that too. Like we are in messed up families and we can't get rid of each other.
Yeah. I also think it's really funny. All of this happens in Dothan, which there's a city here, Dothan, Alabama, which is where my mom was born. And I got some kinfolk out there in Dothan.
Any messed up families?
Well, they're not messed up, but some of my more colorful family members live out there. There's some more colorful stories of the people that live out in Dothan.
Couple ochre folks.
A couple ochre folks out there. No, Aunt Valerie and Uncle Steve, you are not who I'm talking about.
You're going to get thrown in the pit pretty soon.
I know. I'm going to get some phone calls on this one, but whatever. If it gets them listen to the podcast, I don't care.
There you go.
All right. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah.
You good?
I'm good.
All right. Well, what?
I was just going to say, see you all or talk to you all in episode 2.
Yeah.
When things get worse.
I am really excited about the second episode because there will definitely be like the kids version of part 2.
Oh yeah.
And then the adult version of part 2.
It's true. It's true. There's some spicy stuff in part 2.
Very spicy stuff.
Yeah. We don't need to talk a lot about it, but
it's there. All right. Well, we're just not mature enough to handle it. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Minivangelism. It is a very G-rated Instagram page right now. And I'm kidding. If you have any emails, or if you'd like to send us an email with your thoughts on the Joseph story, or if you want to tell us about some really weird dreams that you'd like us to interpret, you can email minivangelism@gmail.com. We've heard a lot from some of our followers, and we just love getting emails from you guys because we like to know who's listening. Make sure that you like and follow us wherever you listen to these podcasts. And finally, we are a ministry of Grace United Methodist Church in Manassas, Virginia. If you are looking for a church home, you are always welcome to join us here. More information can be found at umcgrace.org. All right.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You know who I think I'm going to go call?
Who?
Your wife.
Do it.
Okay. Well, it's a race. It's a race to see who gets to talk to her first. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Minivangelism and the Driver's Seat are hosted by Anna Burrell and Drew Colby. Theme song written by David Burrell and produced by Evan Setzer. The theme song was performed by David Burrell, Drew Colby, and Evan Setzer. Podcast, sound design, and editing done by David Burrell. Minivangelism and the Driver's Seat are a ministry of Grace United Methodist Church in Manassas, Virginia. For more information, check out umcgrace.org.